G'day, welcome back to the lab. Some updates on what's been happening with this little machine here after our last, after the last round of last season of New Zealand Super Lap Series, where we went out to beat, I thought I had to beat a 113.8. It turns out it was a 113.1 was my previous best time, which works out, that's quite a little bit ironic because I don't know, it was first or second lap I went out and did a 112.1 and went out to improve on that, did a 111.1, so not bad. 1 second and then 1 second, and of course the next one was 110.69, something like that. So I did always say that I thought the car would do 10s, 1 minute 10s, but didn't expect it with me behind the wheel, but there you go. So that worked out quite well. Let's have a look and see what I've been up to. We'll start underneath at the front here with a couple of tweaks that happened. This is just signboard, and actually you can see the laminates there. So it's just a very thin coating of aluminium over the top of some plastic, and the aluminium's got, not sure if that's paint or powder coating, whatever, or plastic, whatever they've got on there. So that's all I've used for that. You can see the thickness there. It's about 4, not sure, it might be 4 or 5 mils thick, something like that. Does the job. A little bit heavy, but it's all right. There's actually a video on here on how to make that, and you'll see why I've got some holes in here and covered up with tape. A little bit of a faux pas there, but never mind. As you can see, they do get beaten to death a little bit, bottoming out on stuff here, there, and everywhere. So not too concerned over that little faux pas there with the extra holes, because that'll be due for a replacement in a couple of months anyway. Originally this overlapped this frame, cross member, brace, whatever we want to call it. The original factory thing was just a pressed steel thing, just one side. I've added the extra side here, which added extra depth to it. And that's to support the bottom end of the transfer case. You guys won't be able to see it. It's up in there somewhere. Anyway, so what I've done is I've added onto the front of that a tab, and onto the back a tab, and then I've flush mounted those things there. And what that has achieved is lifting the I'm not going to get the angle, sorry about the banging crashing, lifted the splitter up a little bit, reduced the frontal area of the car, flattened this out underneath the car. Tiny incremental improvement on airflow underneath here, but I felt like mucking around and doing stuff and things. This panel here, rebuilt this is a new one. The other one was beaten to death. It's kicking around somewhere, but a new version of that, a little bit lighter material, tiny bit of weight save there, not much. Now I've polished our pipe here. This is the coolant pipe for the engine, because shiny things don't get rid of heat as easily as dull things. And these are our two intercooler pipes. They run very close at some points under here, so I just spent 3 or 4 minutes and did that just to reduce the heat transfer from there into there to help with our intercooler temps. The other thing I've done with the intercooler system, so this is actually looking a little bit tidier in here. I've actually had a little bit of a clean up. I haven't gone nuts, but anyway. The original system, we were running AN10 fittings all the way through it. When we did, let's see if we can turn this camera around without crashing it. Have to take our time. When we did this, when I did this, put this radiator supplied by Repco and Turapa there. When I modified that, and put that in the front of the car, that fitting there that you see, that's AN12. So I upgraded all the fittings in the front here, the AN12, and the stuff that was in the back was still, apologies, bet that made you dizzy, stuff in the back was still AN10. Now it's imperial size obviously, but I'm going to talk in metric because that's what I do. That's 12.5 millimeters ID. That's 15 millimeters ID for the Dash 12 fittings. So that actually gives you, believe it or not, about 44% more surface area on that than what there is on that. it doesn't look like much when they're apart like that, but when you put them side by side. So that should help with flow. We've got a tucked away under the front of the car here, about there, is an 80 litre per minute Davies Craig water pump to shift the coolant around for the intercooler. So let's have a look at the top, have a look at all that stuff. So back here we've got our lovely Chinesium cheap trade me equivalent of eBay styles. Probably has come from eBay actually, Alibaba or whatever. Cheap water to air intercooler, which is, I don't know if it's ever going to work, but we might as well keep flogging a dead horse and see if we can get there. It's been heavily modified. Obviously that the water tanks on the end are sort of similar to what they were to start with, but a little bit different. The air tank's completely different. It's completely changed. Originally it had two 3-inch fittings on it. It's now got two 2.5 on the bottom here and one 3-inch at the top. It was supposed to be rated for 750 horsepower or something like that, I reckon, but yeah, I don't really believe that, but we'll keep trying, increase the flow rate of the coolant through there and see where we are. We might get there. We might get there. So obviously that's everything's AN12 fittings now, the whole way through. Like I say, 44% more capability of flowing water through all the fittings and hoses and all that sort of carry on. Won't change through the core if that was the restriction. I won't have achieved anything except for setting the car up better for when we eventually, which is quite likely to happen, when we replace this with something nicer, better, more effective, something that actually works properly. So the other thing that I did today while I was mucking around is made an alteration to the turbo cooling system. So looking over the top of that brace there, you see there's two hoses and fire sleeve. The one on the bottom of your screen to the right hand side, that's a water cooling hose. So obviously two turbos, so we need effectively 4 hoses for cooling the turbos, 2 in, 2 out. What I did in the original system was the hot pipes on the back of the engine runs across, goes through an elbow, goes down. It's got a air bleeding tank up here to try and make sure we didn't have air bubbles in the system, try and sort that out. It does help. I still think we're having a little niggly problem, which I'll explain in a second. Don't worry about the yogurt container. I'm draining the oil catch can. There's a bit of sludge in there. It takes a while to come out. So hot pipe out of the back of the engine, round the elbow, down. If we look carefully, sorry about that. That would have made a big noise on your screens. You can see that pipe that's pretty much in the middle of the screen there with a fitting coming off it. That's one of the hoses that runs off to the turbos. There's another one just a little bit further below that. So that's higher pressure side. So the water would be coming out of there. Actually quite hot water coming out of there. It came around and it went, let's see if we can see this side without crashing the gimbal. Where is it? There's a blue fitting on the side of the engine. There it is, just behind that grey plug. There you go. That blue fitting there. I've now blanked that off. It's right on your left. Sorry, it's to the far side of the screen on the left. That's the bypass fitting for the coolant system for the engine. So the thermostat lives just behind here. When that's closed, what happens is the water pump then circulates water around from that hot pipe on the back of the motor. There's a big hose that comes around and comes into that bypass fitting, and it circulates it around that way until the engine, it runs it past the back of the thermostat basically, until the engine's up to temp, and then the thermostat will open up. So I think what's been going on there is I've made a bit of an error plumbing it like that, because while it's warming up and the thermostat's closed, that's all good, that works fine. There's enough pressure over here to push the water, and there's enough suction over here to suck the water, so you get flow. So it goes through the turbo cores, and that's all good. When the thermostat opens up, however, the system changes, and there's no longer the flow that we had before. Plus, we've got a water pump on the front of the car that is taking water from the hot side and pushing it through the radiator and pushing it back up here to the thermostat. So that's potentially taking the flow and stalling it. It could be pushing the same sort of pressure on both sides of it, and we won't get our flow through our turbocharger cores, and it'll just boil up the fluid that's in there. And when I was replacing the hoses, there were sort of signs that that may have been going on just from some of the things I saw in there that I'm not going to go into, but it looks like that might have been happening. So simple fix for that, which is going to be good, shouldn't give any trouble, is cold pipe that's returned from the, this is really hard to get in here and show you. There's a fitting on there now, right there. That's a return from the radiator. That should be cold water driven by the electric water pump, not the engine pump in this. So even when the thermostat's closed, actually especially when the thermostat's closed and the electric water pump's going, those turbos are now, there's one there, they're now going to effectively have the entire radiator for the engine to cool those turbos down. So that'll be good. That should work fine. When the thermostat opens up and the engine pump kicks in as well, it will reduce the flow a little bit, but I don't think anywhere near as much as what we were having before. It's a trial and error thing. The alternative is to have another pump altogether to flow some coolant through those turbos, which I don't want to do. It's just overcomplicated and more weight and pain in the ass. So we probably won't be doing that. But that's all. That's all that's happened. I cleaned it a little bit. But she's ready to go. We just got to wait. Oh, no, there's actually more. Glenn told a lie. There's more that happened. There's more that happened. When I built this, I was still actually quite banged up from the crash that I had a long time ago. So the whole front of the car was actually skew if it was off to the passenger side, left-hand side for you Americans, would be the driver's side. It was off that way by about 10 millimeters. So when I was trying to do relatively aggressive race car style wheel alignments, this side here was good. That was all covered up by the, it's not so much there when it's in the air, right? So you put it on the ground, and that it does actually tuck back in when it's on the ground. But it was all covered up by the guards, and that's cool. But over on this side, if we had any aggressive sort of camber, we were hanging out in the breeze like that when it was on the ground, and that doesn't pass scrutineering, right? Because we have to have our tyres covered up by the guards, a certain amount of the tyres anyway. So there is a bracket in behind here. You can see there's some screws, and they run across. There's a lower radiator support panel that I've replaced with a big chunky aluminium. That's it there actually. Big strong aluminium beam with some holes cut in it to reduce the weight. Pulled this panel here out of the way, took all the screws out, pushed the front of the car across, re-drilled all the holes, re-drilled and tapped. Now the front of the car's square. It's good. So I fixed that, and now I've given us 1.5 degrees of negative camber on the front wheels, which we didn't have before. We were less than 0.5 degree. So we've got that taken care of. I've got our new Carbotech XP10 brake pads are in there, front and rear. Rotors are all cleaned up, ready for bedding those in. Everything's had a bit of a tickety-boo, bit of a service, changed the oil in the transfer box, etc. We're good to go. Let's wait and see when our season starts. Right, cheers, boy. Nah, it's not a waterfall. Yeah, it's like a fire hose. Don't worry, I don't run it with coolant level that low because it'll aerate the water. Then you don't get as good cooling. So that won't be very good. If you don't believe me, we'll turn this off. I've just bypassed this. Look at all the air in the water. That's not going to help it get cool. Anyway, cheers, bye.